You awaken beneath the red dust of Korriban. Though you do not remember dying, the wind coils like a serpent around your shoulders as you rise, bones crackling from centuries uncounted. The tomb walls shimmer with a dull fire, not of heat, but of memory ancient and breathing. The air itself tastes like rusted iron and whispered names. You have crossed a threshold, not marked in time, but in hunger. You do not walk here, you are summoned. Each footstep echoes not in sound, but in weight, pulling forgotten shadows from behind crumbling columns and soul-scarred statues. They do not speak, they simply observe, for they know what is written on your spine. The first spell finds you before you even see it. It slithers across the floor like a ribbon of smoke, pale green and humming with venom. You reach down, not with hands, but with understanding, and it wraps around your wrist like a shackle made of song. The words bloom in your mind like a virus, syllables of pain that feel like truth. It is the tongue of Carcel, the one that once taught the stars how to scream. You remember nothing and everything. You touch the obsidian wall. It responds not with light, but with blood. Yours. The stone accepts your presence, reads your veins like scripture, and reveals a door without hinges. Behind it, the tomb of Darth Ivesh, the Woundator, keeper of the 70th curse. You step through. The air is thick here, as if grief itself had been distilled and poured into the stone. Along the chamber walls, you see murals carved in talon and fire. They move when you do not watch them, directly scenes of ancient rituals, of Sith lords peeling time apart with chants older than galaxies. A voice calls to you, but not from outside. It blossoms in your chest like a black rose. Speak your name and be forgotten. Speak my name and be reborn. You do not know your name anymore. You offer silence. That is enough. The chamber shifts. You are now beneath the earth and above the stars. A paradox in stone. The force does not flow here, it waits, coiled like a beast, anticipating, and it recognizes you, not as master, not as servant, but as vessel. Darth Ivesh stirs. His sarcophagus opens not with noise, but with understanding. His remains are long gone, but the spell of his voice survives. It hovers like ash, gathers like storm cloud. The Woundator does not speak words. He speaks need. You are given a vision. It arrives with no warning. You see yourself on a throne of broken sabers, ruling over silence. Around you, Jedi and Sith alike, bound not in allegiance, but in ruin. Your hands drip with futures. Your tongue is coated in prophecy, but your eyes are gone, hollowed. Black stars where hope once lived. You collapse, gasping. The tomb closes, but not before the echo of Darth Ivesh merges with your bones. The 70th curse now lives in your marrow, dormant, waiting for the 7th moon to crack. You walk out, but you are not alone. You carry him, and he carries you. The shadows part as you emerge into the valley. The statues of forgotten lords loom like sentinels. One crumbles in your presence, not out of fear, but out of recognition. It remembers when you were something else, something unshaped. The wind calls your new name. You do not speak it aloud. Instead, you kneel. The sand burns. The air hums with arcane voltage. You draw a sigil on the ground using your fingertip, though you do not remember learning the symbol. It glows softly with a heatless fire, a circle, a mouth, a wound. You begin to chant not in sound, but in pulse. The force bends, ever so slightly, like a tree leaning toward a storm it does not welcome, and the tombs, they listen. You have become a prayer written backward. The spell that lingers on your wrist now pulses. It has rooted into your skin. Veins blacken. Eyes glow dimly with a green that should not exist in this world. You are not possessed, nor are you sovereign. You are a bridge, and bridges must always break. The sky fractures above Korriban for a single moment, just one crack, like a mirror remembering it was once whole. Through it, you glimpse a throne made of bone, suspended in the black sea between galaxies. Something is sitting there, watching, waiting for your fall or your rise. Your heartbeat slows. The sigil completes, and the old tongue speaks through you. I am the whisper between truths. I am the breath between gods. I am Sith, not by birth, but by surrender. The wind stops, time holds its breath, and Korriban ancient, you as its own. But in doing so, it asks a price. You feel the first tooth loosen in your mouth. It is not decay, it is inheritance. You smile, you bleed, you begin to understand. You descend again. Though no stairs greet your feet, and no walls guide your hands, Korriban opens for you, like a wound that never healed, bleeding memory and meaning into your breath. As you walk deeper into the unseen, your skin vibrating with the weight of languages too cruel for time. Your bones humming with the memory of spells buried in the marrow of extinct beasts whose dreams gave shape to Sith thought. And as you move through these passages, carved in pain and dust, you feel the Force not as a flow, but as a growl, low and coiling, speaking through the teeth of shadows, warning and welcoming in the same ancient exhale. And you know without, knowing how you know that this place is older than the Sith, older than the Sixum, older than the very word dark, and it has been waiting, not for someone, but for the version of you that remembers being forgotten. The air begins to shift as you arrive at the Maw of Sulik, a sunken altar encircled by broken pillars, inscribed with spiraling runes that pulse beneath your gaze like veins beneath bruised skin. And you kneel not from reverence, but from resonance as if your blood recognizes the earth it came from, and the altar responds, splitting not with sound, but with surrender, revealing beneath it a chamber not built, but bled, a space that smells like rusted light and tastes like truth spoken through torn veils. You descend again and hear the walls whisper, not in basic, not in Sith, but in something rawer, tongue of friction and forgetting. And it enters your ears like smoke and curls inside your lungs like old fire. And you begin to remember the ritual of unbinding, though no one has ever taught you, and yet your fingers move, your breath aligns, your mind prepares to stretch beyond the edges of flesh, and you draw the circle not with chalk, but with your own cracked nail. Blood welling from the lines, like ink from a forgotten scripture. And in that moment, the chamber blinks, as if reality skipped a beat and let you slip between the eyelids of the Force itself. You chant now, not with voice, but with thought, the old tongue flowing like warm oil across your spine, syllables that make your teeth ache and your soul twitch. And you see through the veil the first Sith gathering beneath 3 black moons, whispering to pyramids that pulsed like hearts, their shadows birthing spells still echoing in Jedi temples, unaware of the roots curled beneath them. You see Darth Vader, draped in skin not his own, laughing as he drank the essence of his master through a chalice of bone. You see the great severance, when sorcery split from saber, and those who chose spell over blade were entombed alive beneath the sands. And then you see yourself not as you are, but as you once were in another lifetime, bound in shackles, carved from starlight, sentenced for speaking the name of a god no force dared to remember. And that name is now breathing again through your bloodstream, curling its vowels behind your eyes, and your mouth opens not to speak, but to release the seal your soul has held since galaxies were young. And as you exhale, the chamber cracks, not physically, but philosophically, and you stand in a world not meant for flesh, but for concept, surrounded by living glyphs and thought creatures stitched from force residue, and they bow to you not as deity, not as ruler, but as kin, and one steps forward, eyes made of reversing time, and places its palm against your chest, saying nothing, but showing everything. Your heartbeat becomes a drum in the ritual of remembrance, and you begin to dance not with your feet, but with your essence, circling the runes in patterns, not geometric, but emotional. And the force bends again, this time willingly, as if seduced by your clarity, your surrender, your rage-wrapped tenderness. And then the chamber collapses around you, folding into a tunnel of thought, and you awaken, not in another tomb, but within a library made of memory, with shelves carved from frozen screams and scrolls inked in truths never spoken aloud. And one scroll unravels before you, its script forming as you gaze, a spell not for power, not for control, but for undoing, the reversal of all force paths, the thread that could unweave Jedi, Sith, and the very idea of dichotomy. And it tempts you, not with strength, but with meaning. But before your mind can clutch it, a voice cuts through the stillness, clear and cruel and familiar. It is your own, older, colder, from a life you locked away, and it says, "To master sorcery is to become the wound that bleeds reality." And with that, the scroll turns to smoke, entering your eyes, your veins, your breath, and you scream. But the scream becomes stars, becomes memory, becomes nothing, and then you are kneeling once more at the maw of Sulik, blood drying on your fingertips, air still vibrating from your silent chant, and the altar closes as if nothing had ever opened. But within you now rests the spell of reversal, a secret not written but lived. And as you rise, the sky above Korriban dims, not from clouds, but from awareness, as if the planet itself blinks, noticing your presence now as part of its pulse. And you begin walking back toward the valley, where the statues now bow slightly, just slightly, their stony lips mouthing something you cannot yet hear. And the wind shifts once more, carrying with it the scent of old fire and new consequence. Song sung backward into becoming, and you feel the force pulse through you. Not in peace, not in war, but in question. You walk through the valley, not as an intruder, not as a supplicant, but as something the tombs remember. Your silhouette bleeding softly into the breathless air, each step writing prophecy into the dust of a world that has forgotten how to forget. And though the statues do not move, you feel their gaze like needles, threading new glyphs beneath your skin, for they know you now, not as one of many, but as the one who has spoken the spell of reversal into the bones of Korriban. And the planet old and bitter and alive stretches beneath your feet like a beast beginning to stir after 1,000 years of sleep. its dreams curled around cataclysms and broken codes. And it listens as you hum to yourself, a low melodic rhythm you don't remember learning. Around you, the cliffs moan, not with erosion, but with remembrance, and in their hollow mouths, you begin to see doors not carved, but born arched thresholds, pulsing with red-veined light, each one leading to a trial shaped by your own shadow. And you know what must come next? You must unmake yourself completely before you are worthy to wear the final name. And so you step through the nearest archway, and the stone melts around you like wax, folding you into a chamber that smells of burnt parchment and fear, where a mirror stands not reflective, but reactive, showing not your face, but your betrayal, your cruelty, your hunger, your failures, each wound you buried in your ascent, now crawling across the surface like a crown of sins. And it speaks in your voice, but with none of your mercy, saying, "Are you ready to become what you fear most?" And before you can answer, the mirror shatters, and its shards embed into your chest, not with pain, but with understanding, and you fall to your knees, not from weakness, but because the ritual demands you shed even your posture. You crawl from the chamber, the weight of self-knowledge pressing into your spine like a coiled serpent, and the valley shifts again, revealing the next door, this one humming with green fire and lined in runes that pulse like heartbeats. And as you pass through, you find yourself in the temple of first hunger, a sanctum without ceiling, where the sky above weeps memories instead of rain visions of SITH long forgotten, whose names have become curses, whose spells have become diseases, and you walk among them, not as prey, but as witness, their skeletal fingers brushing your shoulders as if blessing you with fragments of forgotten magic. And you understand, to master SITH sorcery is not to dominate, but to dissolve, to become vessel, wound, and weapon all at once. The final test comes not with a roar, but with stillness. As you enter the chamber of the void chant, where no sound lives, where no thought dares to form, where silence itself is alive and cruel, and you sit in its center, breathing in the nothingness, letting it devour each piece of you that still clings to the illusion of shape. And as hours become days, or maybe moments, the silence begins to sing not in words, but in permission, allowing you to speak the final spell, one not meant to be, uttered but remembered in the marrow of stars. And as you chant, it eyes open, body still, you see yourself unravel, thread by thread, your spirit peeling away the names you once wore, your soul stepping forward, naked and wordless and true. And when you emerge from the temple, Korriban does not greet you, for it no longer sees you as other. You are now part of it, another scar in its flesh, another fire in its breath. You return to the place where the spell first found you, the tomb of Darth Evesh, and place your hand upon the stone that once drank your blood. And it opens again, not to entomb, but to crown. And within, you find not relics or remains, but a throne woven from shadow and silence, carved from screams that never escaped. And it calls to you, not with voice, but with longing. And as you sit, the entire valley holds its breath. The force pauses its flow, and you speak the reversal backwards, undoing its echo, anchoring it into reality. And suddenly, all of Korriban feels you, not as an intruder, not even as a SITH, but as the spell incarnate, walking flesh of forbidden text. And the wind rises in a spiral, lifting ash and memory into a vortex above your head, where it forms a sigil only the dead can read. You smile not out of triumph, but completion. For you now understand what no master taught, and no holocron dared record, that Sith sorcery is not about power over others, but the annihilation of the self, until only truth remains, and that truth is neither light nor dark, but hunger, memory, and shape, all braided into one trembling syllable that sounds like your heartbeat and feels like forgetting your name. And as you rise from the throne and walk out into the valley for the last time, your footsteps echo not forward, but backward, erasing all trace of your passage. For the final spell is not to conquer but to vanish into legend, to become the whisper that teaches others how to remember what they should never have known. And as the sky above Korriban closes its eye once more, you dissolve into myth, a shadow stitched into the dust, a name only tombs dare utter, and the Force, ancient and aching, exhales your memory like a prayer that will never reach the gods. You descend the obsidian stairs barefoot, each step warmer than the last, as if the temple itself recognizes your blood heating its breath to welcome the marrow it once carved. Your skin glistens with thin crimson trails, not from wounds, but from memory reawakening. For the glyphs that pulse across your arms were not drawn, they were remembered, coaxed from your flesh by chants that came to you in sleep, syllables that echoed through your bones long before your first scream. Around you, the walls throb like lungs, etched in spiraling blood script that refuses to dry, each rune twitching as you pass, as if tasting your shadow. And you understand this is not architecture, it is anatomy, and you are walking deeper into the temple's living mind, one that dreams in curses and weeps in spells. And as you cross the threshold, marked by 7 identical faces carved in mourning obsidian, your breath catches, not from fear, but from recognition. For this is not your first descent, though you have never been here in flesh. In dreams, you stood in this very spot, dripping in gold ash, chanting the names of the 5 hungering moons, while your voice cracked open the sky and made it bleed logic. And now, in waking, the echoes curl around your neck like old lovers, whispering secrets in a dialect made of thunder, fire, and grief. The corridor bends without warning, not in direction, but in gravity, folding space like paper soaked in oil, and suddenly you are walking sideways, then downward, then into yourself, and with each shift, your body becomes less matter and more meaning, until you reach the chamber where time exhales. And there, suspended in liquid shadow, floats the book without pages, its surface rippling with thoughts not your own, its ink squirming like orphaned eels as you approach, and you reach for it not with fingers but with ache so pure it carves a path through the air like lightning searching for guilt. And the book lands in your palm like a newborn storm, cold and violent and alive. And when it opens, it does not reveal writing, become me. And so you inhale the first line, not through your eyes but your hunger, and it burns down your throat like liquefied rebellion, curling behind your ribs, embedding itself into the spaces between every moment you ever regretted. And as the book dissolves into your bloodstream, you begin to change not shape, but sentence, your presence rewriting itself in real time, a living clause in an unfinished prophecy written by stars that once died to birth Sith language. Around you, the temple reacts, sighing in pleasure or panic, and the walls split open like cracked skin to reveal veins of moving scripture, sentences of spellwork bleeding upward like sap, and from those open wounds emerge the keeper's doll, faceless, cloaked in silence, their fingers ending in quills. Moment. You speak the first incantation that has not been uttered since the Obsidian War. Ancient scrapes, the air like flint against sorrow, and the blood script answers, rising from the floor like steam, forming into a shape that has no name but every consequence, a beast of ink and vengeance, with eyes like spilled prophecy and breath that carries the scent of burned truth. And it circles you once before, plunging into your chest, lodging itself behind your heart where it waits, coiled and dreaming, a spell made flesh, a spell that is you. And you are alone now, not in silence, but in symphony, as the temple sings through your blood, its rhythms braided with yours, and you walk onward, deeper, beneath roots of forgotten trees, and beneath the bones of dead chance, until you reach the final Dora slab of glass, filled with screaming faces pressed against the inside. And they beg not for freedom, but for remembrance. Each one a sorcerer who tried to control the spell instead of becoming it, and you press your hand to the surface, not with command, but with invitation, and the door melts, opening into a chamber of breathless red light, where the very air recites poetry in the old tongue, and you realize that every spell ever spoken has gathered here, waiting not to be cast, but to be chosen, letting the force weigh your soul like an ancient scale, and the one that comes forward is not the strongest, not the most destructive, but the most patient, the spell of living lexicon, a curse that grows with you, learns through you. Because you no longer fear power, you fear forgetting why power was first born in the dark. And as the spell coils around your spine and closes your eyes from within, you begin to hum again, the same rhythm as before, and the temple exhales. And for the first time in an age, the blood script sleeps, satisfied with its chosen sentence. You do not wake, for you were never asleep. And yet the temple shifts around you as if sensing your breath has learned a deeper rhythm, its walls unfolding like petals of black glass to reveal passages that once denied all entry. And in this second descent, you are no longer student, no longer stranger, but something rarer, echo wearing flesh, and the blood script no longer shies from your steps, but pours toward you like thirsty rivers seeking the shape of your intent. With each corridor you pass, the temple tells you stories, not in voice, but in shifting temperature, in murmuring glyphs pressed into the ceiling with a heat that bleeds memory into your scalp. And you begin to understand that this place was not built by hands, but by consequences, by generations of broken vows and forgotten spells, each corridor a wound in reality, wrapped in sorcery to keep it from screaming. And as you walk deeper, the air grows thicker, denser, filled with words that were never meant to be spoken aloud. Words so sharp they could blind galaxies, and you walk through them like fog. Soon you come upon the well of unvoiced spells, a pool of black ichor that trembles with each of your thoughts, and you kneel at its edge, watching as your reflection splits into 1,000 versions of you, one with golden eyes, one with hollow ribs, one with no mouth but a screaming chest hand. You realize these are not futures, but failures, discarded selves still clinging to your breath, and you place your palm into the well, letting it taste your intent. and in return it offers not water but memory, a vision of the first sorcerer, nameless and cruel, who carved the initial letter of the blood script into his own eye and then stared into the force until it blinked. The vision wraps around your bones like frostbite, and as it fades, you rise, changed, though you cannot say how, only that something inside you now sings in reverse. You continue forward, following a hall where walls undulate like throat tissue, and every few steps a new incantation forces itself into your memory, claws its way down your spine, and settles like a parasite. And yet you do not resist, because you understand that to be filled is to be emptied first, and your soul has already been scraped clean by the temple's will. Ahead lies the choir of the hallowed, not a choir of people, but of tombs, lined side by side in endless dark, each sarcophagus singing a different line of a spell so old it no longer remembers its meaning, and the song crawls into your ears, each note stitched from regret and ruin, and you hum along, not because you know the words, but conceptually spilling out old knowledge in the shape of breathless winds and half-seen symbols, and you inhale what you can before the rest turns to ash. Then a great eye opens above you, not literal, but ever-present, the eye of the obsidian god, etched into the ceiling by worshippers whose bones now line the cracks in the floor, and it stares, judging not your strength but your silence, and you offer it no plea, only presence, and the eye blinks once, and in that moment your heart skips a beat that is filled by the voice of the temple itself. 1,000 voices braided into one truth. You are no longer reading the spell. You are becoming the language, and your veins light up. Lines of red fire curving across your body like a living map, and the air begins to shift into layers, separating into realms: sight, thought, hunger, will, and you must choose which one to step into, but you do not hesitate. You step into will, and it receives you like an old robe wrapping around your essence. Here, gravity is not direction, but desire, and you fall upward, downward, inward, until you land in the chamber of the inscripted breath, where the air itself is carved with floating runes that pulse each time you exhale, and your lungs begin to ache, not from effort, but from translation, because each breath now carries meaning, each exhale a verse added to the poem of your presence, becoming less corridor and more body, less sanctuary and more skin, until you are no longer inside its you, are inside you, and it is you. And all spells begin to sound like your voice. All glyphs begin to resemble your scars. You come upon the lexicon crucible, a sphere of swirling symbols spinning around a heart of black flame, and the flame watches you, waiting, and you speak not to it, but through it, using a tongue the force itself recoils from, and the flame expands, wrapping around you without burning, licking at your fears, and you scream, but the scream tastes like power, and the power tastes like surrender, and then the flame enters you. Crucible, taller in presence, quieter in spirit, and the temple does not follow you. Carry it now, in your blood, in your breath. You walk on, not toward an end, but a beginning that forgot where it started. And as you pass beneath a final arch carved with the names of those who broke under lesser spells, you do not mourn them, only thank them, for their failure has opened this door, and on the other side waits the scribe of ending, a figure cloaked in ink that drips upward, eyes made of punctuation marks that rearrange themselves to mirror your doubt, and it offers you a single quill, made from your own rib, and says nothing. For this moment is not for speech, it is for sentence. And you take the quill, press it against the surface of the world, and begin to write the first letter of a spell that has not yet decided if it is salvation or annihilation. You do not remember beginning the final glyph, but your fingers ache as though they've been writing for lifetimes, each motion carving not ink into paper, but fate into breath. And as the last curve of the rune curls across the skin of the world, the temple exhales through your chest, its old breath folding your soul into something narrow, sharp, and unreadable. You stand beneath a sky made of forgotten scripture, stars blinking like runes too tired to speak, and for the first time, the force around you falls utterly still, not dead, not dormant, but listening, as if the galaxy itself holds its breath, afraid that your next thought might rewrite its laws. Beneath your feet, burned for knowledge, vanished into spells they failed to complete, and you see their shadows dancing across your own like hungry ghosts begging for erasure, but you do not grant it. For you understand now that erasure is not mercy, but exile. And these specters must remain to remind the stones what fear tastes like. You descend once more into the final sanctum, where the blood script flows freely along the walls, rivers of sentient ink slithering in circles that mimic the orbit of extinct planets. And it parts for you, opening a path into the hall of breathing. Names where the air vibrates with incantations that are not spoken but inhaled. Here, a great altar waits, carved from the ribs of a beast that was never born, its surface lined with empty spell vessels, and beside them lies a single blade knot of metal, but of word, its edge made from the first verb ever spoken by the SITH, the verb of becoming, of devouring, of declaring the self as storm and sermon. And you take it in your palm, and it does not cut your flesh but your hesitation, spilling out your final fear and leaving only form, pure and painful. Then the altar glows, not with fire but with remembering, and it offers you the last rite, the spell of release, the incantation that frees a soul, not from life, but from limitation. And as you whisper it, each letter manifests as light that coils through your bloodstream. Heart of that descent, you find the library unwritten, where scrolls sing lullabies to one another, and texts dream of being read. And in the center sits the first sentence, still pulsing, still unfinished, waiting for a soul brave enough to speak the next word. And you speak it, not aloud, but with the totality of your being. And the library shudders, some scrolls bursting into ash, others erupting into stars, and you rise once more, alone but never empty, walking now through corridors that collapse behind you, not in ruin, but in reverence. For the temple understands it no longer needs to exist, it has passed into you, into your voice, your pulse, your shadow. And as you reach the outer mouth of the sanctuary, where stone kisses stormlight, and old lightning etches poems across the distant sky, you look down at your hands and see not fingers, but calligraphy. Your veins filled with metaphors, too vast to speak, and you begin to chant, not from memory, but from silence, letting the blood script flow from your pores like oil and sorrow, painting the sand with verses that summon not beasts or fire, but understanding. And the ground answers not with tremors, but with stillness, a reverent hush that spreads across the valley as if even the dust dares not move while you write. And you write until the sun forgets its shape and the moons remember their names. And when your body can no longer hold the song, you carve it into the sky with your final breath, a scream of syllables so sacred the stars bend to hear it, and then quiet, not death, but return. For you are no longer a being, but a language, no longer a seeker, but a scripture. And your story becomes the ink future sorcerers dream of drinking when they dare enter the obsidian depths and follow the blood script, to the place where spells are not cast but lived. You awaken in the mouth of something that never stopped, chewing a chamber whose walls are made not of stone, but calcified bone, every surface lined with the etched ridges of molars that once fed on Jedi marrow, their enamel still slick with memory. And as your eyes adjust to the pale phosphorescence bleeding from the cracks in the skull-lined ceiling, you realize you are not standing in a tomb, but in a Jotha ossified maw of an ancient war beast, bred by Sith alchemists to consume the Force itself. And within this hunger temple, time does not move, it digests. You move slowly, every step echoing like a nerve twitch, and you feel the presence of the crown before you see it, pulsing like a second heart beneath the floor, calling not with language but with appetite. And though your hands tremble, they do not hesitate, for you were drawn here not by map or fate, but by bloodline, by the shape of your skull, by the particular frequency of grief in your thoughts that the crown remembers. The walls begin to whisper as you move closer, not in voices, but in sounds made by teeth grinding through resistance, through ideology, through flesh, through hope. And you understand that this relic is no symbol of rulership, no ornament of legacy, but a throne worn upon the mind. And it does not offer power, it demands sacrifice. When you finally reach the chamber, it greets you like a coffin turned inside out, the crown resting atop a pedestal of femurs, each one belonging to a Jedi whose name you will never know, because their names were devoured first, digested before. Their bodies and the crown itself is not metal, but enamel, a circlet of fused molars and incisors, too symmetrical to be natural, too haunted to be forged. And when you lift it, your skin remembers being burned by it in another life, and your breath shortens, not from fear, but anticipation. Because the moment you place it upon your head, you will no longer be merely a seeker, you will be a sentence passed across generations, a curse carried forward. And so you lower it slowly onto your brow, and the moment it touches your flesh, the chamber howls not in rage, but in welcome, and your mind splits open like a fruit too ripe to remain whole. Your thoughts spilling into the crown and its memories, flooding into you like an infection of ancient violence, and you are made to kneel not by force, but by weight, the psychic density of centuries collapsing into your spine. And within your skull, the crown begins to speak not with words, but with sensation, the terror of a Padawan torn from his master by invisible teeth. The agony of a sentinel whose saber shattered upon biting into this very helm, the slow hunger of a Sith Lord who fed it children just to hear it laugh, and you see through their eyes, feel through their deaths, and yet do not recoil, because some part of you, old cruel honest, has always wanted this, not power, not domination, but remembrance, the kind of memory that lives in bone and cannot be rewritten by the victors of history. The force within you begins to twist, no longer flowing like a current, but bubbling like spoiled marrow, and you do not resist, because the crown is not content to rest upon your head, must root, must burrow, and as its teeth extend into your scalp like tendrils of thought, you see yourself reflected in the bone-glass mirror behind the altar, and your eyes are no longer your own. They shine with a pale, brittle light, as if your pupils have cracked into fossilized windows through which dead Sith lords peer, and they smile not in approval, but in hunger shared. The chamber collapses inward, not physically, but perceptually, and you find yourself standing upon a battlefield that was never named, where Jedi bones lie like snow and Sith screams haunt the sky like storm clouds carved from regret. And here, the crown shows you its birth not in a forge, but in a feast. A Sith war beast, devouring 100 fallen before its skull was ripped open and molded into this relic, and then passed from mind to mind, each host giving up more memory, more mercy, until the crown became not an artifact, but an entity, and now it feeds on you, your memories flashing before its invisible tongue, your first betrayal, your softest lie, your most intimate cruelty, and it drinks them as wine, savoring each end, and then offers you one in return, a vision of a temple long buried, where the crown's twin still sleeps, forged not of teeth, but of tongues, waiting for a voice brave enough to sing its song backwards. You collapse to your knees once more, the weight of this knowing pressing into your chest like a blade made of silence, and the bone beneath you cracks softly, as if sighing, as if accepting you into its breath, and you rise, changed not, wearer of the crown, but a part of it, another tooth in its eternal grin. And as you leave the chamber, it does not fade behind you. It follows through shadow, through thought, through dream, its voice, now threading through your own, so that every word you speak carries the taste of bone, and every glance you cast makes the weak remember the shape of their own skull. And you do not mourn this transformation, for you understand, at last, the crown is not cursed, it is remembering. And now, so are you. You walk through a corridor, made entirely of rib cages, each arch overhead curving like the memory of a scream, and the crown pulses against your skull, not in pain, but in rhythm, its own ancient heartbeat, syncing with yours until you can no longer tell where your thoughts end and its desires begin. And as you step deeper into the ossuary sanctum, the very floor beneath you whispers with each movement. Thousands of names etched into the calcified dust, none of which belong to you, not yet. Though the crown assures you that if you continue, yours will be the loudest among them. And it begins to guide you not with commands, but with cravings, pulling your gaze toward a spiral stairway descending into the throat of bone, a place where breath and prayer are indistinguishable. And as you follow, the air grows warmer, not with heat, but with memory fermenting, thick and sweet and rotten with power, until the walls open wide to reveal a vast cathedral beneath the surface of the world, lit not by flame or crystal, but by the phosphorescent aura of decayed force, echoes of chants that never ended, still looping in the marrow of the stone. And at the far end, resting on an altar carved from fused jawbones, lies the Palate Codex, a slab of translucent ivory upon which the first wearer of the crown once chewed language into spells, each toothmark a stanza of power, each crack a vow pronounced too violently to survive. And you approach slowly, your mouth dry with anticipation, your fingers tingling as if the nerves remember holding this knowledge in another life, and the crown hums, louder, eager, excited, its hunger cresting as you place your hand upon the codex and feel it vibrate like the spine of a beast dreaming of war. And as you close your eyes, the words rise, unbidden, into your throat, not spoken, but exhaled, breathed like poison, like perfume, and they coil around you, a spectral chant that wraps itself around your ribs and begins to pull, not to harm, but to make space. And suddenly you are hollow, an empty vessel, ready to receive the spell of bone calling, the invocation of voices long chewed but not silenced, and they pour into you, thousands of voices, each shaped like a memory, each carrying a sorrow too vast for time, and your mind stretches to hold them. Your soul buckles, but the crown anchors you, biting softly into your temples to keep you from unraveling. And through this agony you begin to sing, not beautifully, not musically, but truthfully, a song made of bone dust and breath. And the codex responds, lifting from the altar and shattering into dust that circles you in a halo of biting knowledge, each fragment embedding itself into your aura, into your history, rewriting the story of your existence so that your birth was not of flesh, but of gnawing teeth and ritual hunger. And now, with this new identity etched into your marrow, the temple opens again, revealing a path lined with the skulls of those who once failed to wear the crown. And they do not speak, but their silence is loud, and it judges you kindly, as if you've already surpassed their final breath, and you continue walking deeper now, until the world narrows into a vertical shaft filled with the sound of chattering bones, a sound that grows louder with each step until it becomes language itself. And then, at the bottom you find the table of 13 tongues, a relic not meant to be understood, only consumed, and upon it rests a jaw carved from the remains of a Jedi healer who once tried to sing the crown into dormancy, her sacrifice still warm upon the glyphs burned into the table's surface. And the crown urges you to place it beside the jaw, and you do, and they fuse not as relics, but as memories converging, and the resulting eruption of force energy knocks you back into a trance, where you see the crown's true origin, from war, but from desperation, a Sith scholar gone mad with hunger for legacy, who fed his own lineage to the Boneforge, and wept as he heard their voices echo from the helm. And you wake sobbing, not from grief, but from recognition, for you know now that you are not the first to bear the crown's burden, but you may be the last. And as you rise to your feet, the crown changes shape ever so slightly, growing a new tooth formed from your doubt, and it smiles through you, a grin of predatory calm, and the temple begins to collapse, not in chaos, but in fulfillment, its purpose complete, its song sung, its bones given to the next verse of this endless sorceress requiem. And as the walls fall inward and the ceiling folds into shadow, you rise on a platform of bone, carried upward by unseen hands, and emerge from the earth beneath a blood-red sky, where the stars blink like the pupils of ancient predators. And you stand there, silent, breathing not air, but prophecy, for the crown is now fully awake within you, and its thoughts are your thoughts, its cravings your compass, and though your skin remains yours, your voice no longer belongs to you, and when you speak next, it will be with a language made of fracture and mourning, and the galaxy will listen not because it understands, but because it remembers what happens when the crown of teeth is worn by one who does not flinch. You move now through a world that feels thinner than before, as if reality itself has grown wary of your footsteps. Your breath pulling seams from the veil that once held mystery at a safe distance, and everywhere you walk, the wind carries a low grinding hum, the distant gnash of teeth that no longer exist except as hunger preserved in spirit. And beneath your skin, the crown pulses, not with dominance, but with communion, its ancient awareness braiding itself deeper into your senses, guiding you toward the shrine of splintered judgments, a ruin carved into a cliffside of petrified mandibles, where trial is not administered but endured, where the bone spirits of former wearers return to see if the next host is worthy to be devoured. And you arrive at twilight, when the sun is a cracked tooth in the mouth of the sky, and the wind stinks of old rot and new silence, and you step inside without hesitation. For by now you know fear only as an echo, a flavor without teeth. Within, the shrine is dark, not from lack of light, but from the presence of memory too dense to illuminate. And you feel them waiting, the former bearers, the once chosen, their minds still alive in spectral form, bound not to body or time, but to the oath of pain etched into the crown's roots, and they rise from the stone like steam from bone broth, each one wearing the same grin you now carry, each one blind in different ways, and they circle you, whispering truths your ears cannot hold, but your spine absorbs like cold. And they ask not who you are, but who you were willing to kill inside yourself to become this. And you show them not with words, but with silence, the silence of breath held too long beneath the weight of prophecy, and they nod, one by one, then vanish, their approval stitched into the crown's perimeter like a ring of ash flesh. And suddenly you fall not down, but inward, into the mind spine, the place where the crown stores its first thought, the fossilized spark of will that made it more than relic, more than weapon. And as you tumble through it, you witness lifetimes unfurl, a SITH priest whispering forbidden liturgies into the ears of children born without tongues, a dying king feeding his own teeth to a furnace in exchange for the chance to watch his empire burn from within, a mother giving her newborn to the bone forge in a moment of sacred betrayal, all memories, all absorbed, all living inside the whispering enamel now fused to your skull. And you land in a room not built, but remembered, a circular chamber where walls are made of knuckle bones, inscribed with choices that were never taken, and in the center floats a single molar, enormous and glowing with the blue-white fire of exposed force. And the crown instructs you without words to bite it, to claim your place in its lineage, not by blood, but by fracture. And you obey, pressing your mouth to the relic, and as your teeth sink into it, your vision floods with red, your nerves scream, not in pain but in translation, and you become still not from paralysis, but from absorption. Every part of you now threaded with the crown's scripture, your thoughts curled like claws around ideas too old for names. And when you open your eyes again, you are standing beneath a sky that no longer weeps starlight, but bleeds it, constellations smeared like chalk over the black canvas of fate. And you know now what must come next, not conquest, not revenge, but ritual, the old ritual of remembrance, by devouring, where the host must consume a piece of what was lost in order to reshape what comes. And so you gather the dust of the shrine's fallen names, mix it with the marrow ink seeping from your fingertips, and draw the circle of Ma, a sigil forbidden even among SITH, a prayer made from chewing and release. And within its center, you place the last fragment of yourself, still untouched by power your Namand. You speak it aloud for the last time, allowing the wind to carry it into the mouth of eternity, where it is swallowed without echo. And in that silence, the crown smiles through you, and together you begin to chant, calling forth the final verse, the spell that no one remembers crafting, because it crafts itself through the one who dares wear the crown fully. And as you chant, the ground splits, the shrine howls, and the force bends not in service, not in resistance, but in curiosity. For even it has never known what a being fully devoured by remembrance can become. And when the dust settles and the circle fades, you are gone, not vanished, but transformed, walking now not as person, but as parable, a legend shaped like bone, a warning carried in every creak of old steps, every whisper of teeth grinding behind locked doors. And from this moment on, wherever someone speaks of fear, or legacy, or the taste of power that lingers on the tongue like ash, they will unknowingly speak of you, the one who wore the crown of teeth not as ornament, but as origin, and gave it voice once more. You find the chalice buried not in earth, but in forgetting, entombed at the center of a labyrinth made from the breath of those who swore never to speak again, and it calls to you without sound, without promise, only presence, heavy and cold, like the moment before a thunderclap, or the hush between heartbeats when death forgets itself. You walk blindfolded by design, for the path to the chalice of silence is not mapped in sight, but in surrender. Each step guided by the absence of thought, by the weight of your own quiet unraveling, and the walls around you pulse not with light, but with restraint, a throb of invisible memory, stitched from the voices of sages who chose oblivion over utterance. And the deeper you go, the less of yourself remains, as if each breath drawn in this place is a vow unspoken, a sliver of your identity shaved away by ancient stillness, until finally you arrive no grand threshold, no guardian, only stillness wrapped in bone-colored mist. And there it sits upon a pedestal of petrified scripture, the chalice, shaped not by hand but by hush, forged from the melted tongues of foreseers who saw too much and chose silence over madness. And its surface ripples with light that moves like liquid shadow, as though the force itself has been boiled down to silence and cooled into form. You do not reach for it with hands, but with ache, with the kind of hunger that begins not in the stomach, but in the soul. And the moment your fingers graze its rim, your ears bleed not with pain, but with soundlessness so complete it shatters the illusion of hearing. And you realize that silence is not absency, is presence too vast to be contained by noise. And this chalice does not hold liquid, but a stillness older than time, more sacred than fire. And it invites you not to drink, but to dissolve. And so you lift it slowly to your lips, and in that first sip, your name unhooks from your tongue and falls into the cup like a final prayer. And all at once, the force screams, not in anger, but in recognition, roaring through your spine with the voices of every soul who has ever knelt before this vessel, a choir of forgotten prophets, traitor priests, and mute poets who offered their truths to the void and were answered only with echoes that cracked mountains, and your body convulses, not with pain, but with alignment, as though your bones were musical staves, finally receiving the melody buried in their marrow. And the chalice hums, filling you not with liquid, but with a memory older than galaxies of vision of the first silence, when the force curled inward and wept itself into being, on a planet with no name and no orbit, floating in the gravity of intention alone, where beings without form offered songs to the silence, hoping to earn the gift of stillness. And from their yearning the chalice was born, not created, but crystallized, a relic of restraint, a cup meant only for those willing to become hollow, so that they might echo eternity. And you understand now that your journey has never been about power or control, but about emptying, about making space for something the universe itself cannot carry, and you fall to your knees. Flesh, your memories begin to fade, not lost, but stored, shelved within the stillness, like books no longer needing to be read aloud. And what remains is essence, raw and listening. And in this state, you begin to hear the names 13 of them, old and impossible. And you are shown how to use them not as words, but as frequencies. Each one a door into a different kind of knowing, and you try to speak one aloud, but your mouth locks shut, your jaw a prison forged by reverence. For to say these names is to undo the fabric of sound itself, and so you let them live inside your breath instead, whispering behind each inhale, coloring every exhale with sacred pressure. And the chalice fills again not with silence, but with your voice returning as something else, something quieter but heavier, like a song trapped in amber. And you realize now you are no longer a bearer of silence, but its instrument. And as you return to the place where the force first screamed, the chalice full again in your hands, you are greeted not by acolytes, not by echoes, but by space itself, bending slightly to make room for the stillness you now carry. But utter stillness, the kind that ripples forward like prophecy and backward like memory. A silence so profound that even time hesitates to pass through you. And in this pause, you kneel once more, not in submission, but in offering, placing the chalice upon the altar of your own breath, and waiting not for permission, but for presence. You wait beneath a sky that does not move, a sky stitched shut by silence, and time drips slowly around you like candle wax from a flame that no longer burns. And within this stillness, the chalice glows faintly, not with light, but with permission, pulsing with the breath of every truth it has ever swallowed. And you hold it close, your palms trembling not from fear, but from reverence, too sharp to contain. And as the silence stretches, it begins to speak not in sound, but in sequence, sending pulses through your bones like a code etched in hush. And with each throb you remember things you never lived, the shape of a planet birthed from a scream, the face of a being who wept stars into being, the name of a language spoken only in dreams where the force is deaf. A vesselet is a reliquary of unspoken ages, and in drinking from it you have become a chapter within its silence, a living scripture that breathes in verses of absence, and the world begins to reshape around this quiet gravity, the wind folding its wings, the stones dimming their echoes. Even the force itself seems to curl inward, and soon you are summoned not by voice, but by awareness, to a temple, built beneath the skin of the galaxy, a place that cannot be seen until one has been devoured by stillness. And the chalice leads you, until the stars give way to a door carved into nothing, and you enter not as seeker, but as silence incarnate, and within this sacred void you find them waiting, the keepers of the unnamed names, ancient spirits bound in shape but not form, draped in robes stitched from shadow and breath, their faces obscured by veils of translucent silence that ripple with every movement of your thoughts, and they do not greet you, where a basin of still water rests upon a pedestal of bone and memory, and within that water float syllables, fragmented, shimmering, too delicate to speak aloud, and you understand this is the font of forsaken words, the wellspring from which all forgotten truths were once drawn, and now it offers you a choice: to remember what was never meant to be remembered, or to remain sacred in your forgetting. Lower the rim of the chalice to its surface and watch as the water rises on its own, defying gravity, slipping into the cup like surrender. And with the first sip, your body stiffens as if struck by lightning made of lullabies, and suddenly the force shudders inside you, not in rejection, but in reverence. For what you now hold is not knowledge, it is absence shaped into form, the knowing of things that erase knowing itself, and you begin to dissolve again, not physically, but conceptually, your sense of self peeling back layer by layer, each thought unraveling like twine soaked in moonlight, until you are nothing but the hum of silence, remembering itself. And then the keepers speak, not aloud, but through you, using your breath as their chorus, and their words are simple, eternal, final. All who drink must carry the quiet forward, and with that they vanish, and the basin drains, and the temple crumbles into starlight, and you are left standing in a new place, an old place, a place shaped like a question. And the chalice glows faintly in your hands, its silence heavier now, filled with the names you dared not speak, and you know your journey is not to end, but to echo, to walk the galaxy and carry the hush into temples where screams still echo, into battles where the force is wielded like a weapon. You become myth, not as warrior or prophet, but as pause, as breath, as stillness between storms. And when others kneel before you, they will not ask for blessing, they will simply breathe deeper, drawn into your gravity. And when you offer them the chalice, they will not drink, but they will remember the shape of your silence forever. You drift now through places where no maps exist, not because they are hidden, but because they are inaudible, shaped not by form but by frequency. And the chalice rests inside your chest, as though your heart were hollowed to house it. Every beat no longer a thump, but a ripple of sacred quiet that shifts the air wherever you move. And you understand that you are no longer bound to space as others are, for silence has made you porous, unmoored, and you pass through temples unnoticed, through battlefields untouched, through memories unremembered, a figure clad not in armor or robes, but in stillness itself, and the force bends around you, not in fear, but in hesitation, unsure whether to flow through or retreat. And with each step, you leave behind no footprint, only pause, and people begin to feel your presence before they see you. The way one senses lightning behind the clouds, or hears the shape of a thunderclap before the sky splits. And though you speak not a word, your silence carries more weight than sermons, all gathering in places once filled with noise, now hushed by your passage, where they press their foreheads to cracked stone and listen not for commands, but for what does not come. And from this reverence you learn that silence is a contagion more powerful than belief, more persistent than memory, and soon your name is no longer said, it is breathed as a hesitation, passed from soul to soul, like the moment before truth is spoken and then swallowed. And yet, with each new listener, the chalice grows heavier, not with burden, but with responsibility. For now, your silence is not yours alone. It is a shared vessel, filled with the yearning of those who do not know how to scream, but desperately need to be heard. And so you travel to the place where sound was born, an ancient crater pulsing at the edge of time, where the force once fractured itself into vibration, and where the sky first found voice. And here you kneel, surrounded by the ghosts of language glyphs torn from air, syllables cracked open on the altar of understanding. In rhythm, and for the first time in countless eras, the force ceases its motion not in fear, but in reverence, through skin, through thought, through soul. And you do not resist, for this is not punishment, 'tis transformation, and your body begins to unravel, not into dust, but into hush, into echo, into space between syllables. And the chalice lifts from your hands and drifts upward into the night, where it will find another mouth, another seeker, another vessel unafraid to drink what cannot be swallowed. And as your form fades, your presence remains, seeded into the galaxy like pollen made of breath, settling into cracks where chaos once ruled. And from these seeds grow moments of peace, seconds of pause, lifetimes of reflection. And though no statue is carved in your name, and no scroll bears your likeness, you are everywhere inside the lull before a storm, in the still gaze of a dying master, in the breath of a newborn who has not yet cried. And it is said that in places of great violence, when all hope is gone and screams fill the air like ash, a sudden quiet may descend, inexplicable and vast. And those who survive say it feels like the air itself is listening. And they leave changed, not knowing why, only that they felt something deeper than sound, something that asked for nothing and gave them everything. And though they cannot name you, they carry you in their silence. And so your legacy grows, not loud but lasting, eternal in its gentleness, infinite in its restraint. The one who drank from the chalice and taught the force to listen. You kneel before the mirror, not to see yourself, but to forget yourself. And as your knees press into the cold obsidian of the vault, once sealed by a scream, the reflection before you shatters without touch, as though your presence alone fractures fate, and the shards do not fall, but float, suspended in the breath of this forsaken temple, each sliver a glinting echo of paths not chosen, decisions you never made, lives you never lived. And yet they stare back at you with the weight of memory, as if your soul had wandered too close to the border of what could have been and brought back consequences shaped like glass. You are not the first to kneel here, this much is certain, for the air is thick with ghosts, their regret coating the walls in a quiet sheen of timeless dust. And carved into the stone above the mirror's frame are the words, asterisk to see is to surrender. To surrender is to sever asterisk. And though your heart stutters at the edge of meaning, you do not flinch, because you came not for answers, but for endings. And Darth Nihil's mirror offers them in abundance, fractured and cold, and alive with possibility. Undone, the force here coils like a dying star, dense and imploding, and it touches your spine like a whisper, learning how to scream. And when you gaze into the shards, they do not show you yourself as you are, but as you were meant to be, had mercy, not intervened versions of you draped in tyranny, in fire, in silence, in ash, and one version stands taller than the rest, cloaked in black sorrow, a crown of wires digging into your scalp, your hands trembling with power too vast, too wield, and too precious to release. And this version stares back at you, not in accusation, but in invitation, and you realize with a shiver that the mirror is not prophesied as offering. The voice of Darth Nihil slithers through the chamber then, not as echo, but as presence, a voice made of rusted iron and poisoned silk, and it says, "All futures bend before the will that dares to forget itself." And with those words, the largest shard peels away from the air and drifts toward your chest, embedding not in flesh, but in thought, slicing through your timeline like a blade dipped in possibility. And suddenly you feel time unraveling, not in chaos, but in mourning, threads of your past curling up like smoke, scenes you once lived flickering into nothing, your first memory gone, your first wound forgotten, your first vow unspoken, and the force sighs around you, as if relieved to be free of your certainty. And for a moment you are no one, a breath between births, and in that breath the mirror glows. The other shards begin to orbit, slow and solemn, and within each you see not just yourself, but the galaxy had you chosen differently, wars that never happened, alliances that never broke, stars that were never born, and your stomach turns with the quiet grief of what your choices have cost, what they have saved, and what they have silenced. And you begin to understand what Darth Nihil once did, that the mirror does not show the future. It writes it, and your gaze is the ink. The force begins to churn, not as current, but as canvas, and your thoughts stain it, subtle and irreversible, and the shards press in closer, each one humming with your doubt, your hunger, your ache for release, and you must choose either. Reach forward and reshape what comes, or bow your head and let the mirror burn it all down. And you reach, but not with your hands. You reach with your surrender, with the part of you willing to unmake even your victory, if it means remembering who you were before ambition taught you to speak. And the mirror answers, pulsing once, and every shard melts into light, a web of golden thread that wraps around your limbs, your ribs, your throat, and then tightens not cruelly, but completely. And in that pressure you find stillness, a stillness where the future softens and bends and breathes. And when your eyes open again, the mirror is whole once more, yet you are changed, not older, not wiser, but quieter, as if you've been emptied of the need to know and filled instead with the willingness to witness. And the voice of Nihil returns one last time, softer now, as though speaking through your own tongue. To unmake the future is to remember that it was never owed to you. And as the chamber darkens and the vault seals behind you, you rise, a reflection no longer trapped in glass, but walking, whispering, waiting to be remembered. You walk through the ruins with no roof, only sky, and though the stars above are unchanged, they feel different now, as if aware that something fundamental has shifted in the thread of your existence, and the air tastes like erased prophecy, thick with the scent of timelines that were never born, and you feel the weight of it in your shoulders, not burden, but density, as if each moment ahead has gained mass because of what you've unmade. The mirror no longer hangs behind you in stone, but within you, a constellation of splintered futures nested behind your ribs. And with every breath you take, a possibility vanishes, not with violence, but with grace, like dew kissed away by morning. And the force flows around you differently now, as if unsure where you end and where outcome begins. And as you step into the Temple of Null, a ruin buried beneath the archives of time, you realize the architecture itself recoils from your presence, not in fear, but in unfamiliarity. For those who come to temples seek answers, but you have already become the question. And so the doors open not by mechanism or magic, but by surrender. Stones parting like lungs around your silence, and within you find the atrium of versions, a place where the echoes of paths untaken are kept alive in slivers of glass suspended in stasis. And each shard vibrates with the hum of another self-some powerful, others broken, some ascetic, others monstrous, and you pass between them, slowly feeling the brush of their breath across your skin, and with each one, a tug, an ache, a reminder that destiny is not linear but recursive, a spiral ever tightening around the core of choice. And then you reach the center, where a throne made of fractured reflection waits, shaped from the remains of a mirror that shattered when Darth Nihil stood from it for the final time. And though no one sits upon it, it hums with presence, with history, with ache. And you do not sit, you kneel, not from subservience, but to align your gaze with the surface of the pool before it, a basin of memory, so still it appears empty, until you realize it reflects not the present, but the unchosen. And when you peer in, it does not show you your face, but 1,000 faces with your eyes, each living a truth you abandoned or never dared pursue, and their eyes lock with yours. And you feel their questions, not spoken, but vibrating. Asterisk, was it worth it? Asterisk, and though you have no answer, the force within you tightens like a thread pulled taut, and you lean closer, allowing the basin to kiss your breath, and the surface ripples, and you are pulled downward, not in body, but in consciousness, sinking into a deep library of choice, where shelves stretch into darkness, and every volume is a moment you never lived. And you begin to walk the aisles, fingers brushing bindings that whisper names of people you never loved, wars you never ended, truths you never told, and it aches, it stings, but you do not flinch, because to be the one who unmade the future is to bear witness to all that was sacrificed in the undoing. And so you press onward until you find the last shelf where a single book remains open, its pages blank save for one line etched in red. Asterisk, what you erase, you must embody, asterisk. And with that, you are thrown upward, gasping, returned to the throne room, where the basin has vanished, and the throne now hums louder, and the shards around you begin to shift, rearranging themselves not into a mirror, and the force urges you to lift it, not in violence, but in ceremony, and you do, and it is light in your hand, lighter than guilt, heavier than legacy, and as you raise it, the entire temple exhales, a final sigh from a place that has waited too long to be remembered. And in that breath, you feel the echo of Nihil himself, not as a master, but as a mirror, whispering, to destroy the future is not to abandon it, but to remove what blinds it, and the blade flickers once, then dissolves into your palm, embedding itself in your will, and you walk from the temple with no footsteps. For now you are not bound by forward or backward, but by possibility itself. A being whose gaze fractures the illusion of time, a shadow cast by moments that will never be born. And wherever you go, clocks hesitate, fate blinks, and silence curls softly at your feet. You drift through the in-between now, not walking, not floating, but unfolding, your presence a crease in the fabric of what was and what might be, and the force coils gently around you, confused yet reverent, unsure if it should resist or reflect. And in this quiet motionlessness, you begin to feel what Darth Nihil once felt at the end, an awareness so vast it no longer obeys language, a comprehension so complete it dissolves into silence. And yet within this stillness something stirs, a vibration not of sound but of unrealized consequence, and you follow it, pulled by instinct rather than choice, until you find yourself standing on the threshold of the vault of final versions, a structure carved from collapsed timelines, its walls made of the moment just before regret, its columns humming with futures that blinked out of existence before their first breath. And as the door opens, not by key but by memory, you are greeted by echoes, not of people, but of decisions, each hovering in the air like soft static, choices that never bore fruit, suspended in golden light. And the chamber within is circular, endless, horizonless, a place where reality folds in on itself like paper burning without smoke. And in its center floats the last reflection, a mirror, not made of glass, but of awareness, its surface bending with every breath you take. And as you approach, you see nothing within it. At first, no face, no body, just a swirling of not yet, of might have been. And you realize this is not a mirror of what you are, but what the galaxy becomes in your absence. And it aches to look at it, not from pain, but from mourning, as though each image that flutters across its surface is a memory grieving its own impossibility. And you kneel, as you did before, as all who enter must, and the force narrows its attention, pouring itself into this moment, wrapping the chamber in absolute awareness. And the mirror begins to change. Now it shows not a person, but a wound, a rent in the pattern of history shaped like a question mark. And you understand, you are the wound, the fracture left behind by your refusal to follow the threads laid before you. And in that fracture, new patterns bloom, not because you chose them, but because you refused to choose what was offered. And the voice of Darth Nihil returns, quieter now, aged and cracked and slow, whispering. All prophecy dies in the breath of a question. And with those words, the last reflection unfolds, opening like a flower made of probability, its petals fluttering with sights that ache and shine. Civilization rebuilt by those who were never born, peace brokered by enemies who never met, sorrow healed by voices that once went silent. And you weep, not because you lost them, but because you held them briefly, and that was enough to make them real, if only for a heartbeat. The chamber begins to tremble, not from collapse, but from completion, and the mirror dissolves into a cloud of breath and dust, wrapping around your body, sinking into your skin, until your veins glow softly with the shimmer of undone timelines. And you rise one final time, the force reshaping itself around you, no longer as wielder or wound, but as witness, the one who saw and stepped back, who unmade not to destroy, but to allow what might have been to echo. And as you step beyond the vault, into a galaxy unchanged and yet utterly different, your presence goes unnoticed by most, but felt by all. The pause before a decision, the doubt in a tyrant's mind, the courage in a healer's hand, and your reflection is no longer yours alone, but shared among the stars, a shimmer in every surface that reminds the galaxy it could be something else. And you walk onward, unnamed, unseen, eternal, not as a being, but as a divergence. The quiet legacy of a soul who knelt before a shattered mirror and chose to step away from destiny, so that others might one day shape it anew. You find it not by searching, but by bleeding the vein deep beneath the tomb-cored moons of Mortash, where no star dares glance and no name survives unwarped by echo. And the moment your hand grazes the obsidian roots that curl like petrified arteries from the earth's belly, you feel it twitch beneath your skin, an old pulse hiding just beneath. Existence, ancient and awake, not in thought, but in thirst. For this is not a place you enter, it is a hunger that allows itself to remember you. The cavern exhales around you, not with air, but with memory, thick and cloying, like smoke from a wound that never closed. And the walls glow faintly with veins of crimson ichor, twitching in rhythm with your fear. And you move forward, not with courage, but with ache, your breath fogging from the inside as the force bends around you in quiet unease, as if unsure whether to touch you or retreat. For you carry within you a question the galaxy has long feared to ask. Asterisk, what if the dark side is not a flaw, but a scar left by something even older? And here, in this place, you begin to learn, not by instruction, but by infection. As the vein opens itself to you, like a wound, remembering warmth, revealing layers of history, not told but felt, visions injected into your nerves like venomous song. You see the first wound, the origin fracture, when the force split itself along fault lines of desire and despair, when sorrow became structure and rage was crowned as teacher, and you fall to your knees, not from pain, but from alignment. For something inside you has always pulsed off rhythm, always whispered that balance was a lie, told to silence what could not be tamed. And now that whisper becomes a chorus, deep and slow, spoken in the lost tongue of the dread flesh prophets, whose bones still line the chasm's edge, to sacred, to rot, to cursed, to forget. And they welcome you without moving, without breath, their sockets staring through time, through skin, through morality. And you approach, the heartstone pulsing and raw, and the size of a starved soul embedded into the hollow, where the vein thickens and screams into silence. And it calls not to your ears, but to your will, offering not power, but understanding. And you press your palm to it, and in that instant you are inverted, turned inside out, your thoughts unraveling like threads soaked in blood ink. And you see the truth, that the dark side bleeds because it remembers too much, carries every betrayal, every death, every unshed scream, not as fuel, but as identity. And you weeping now, though no tears fall, feel the veins surge into your bones, not with fire, but with lineage. And you are shown the gallery of those who touched it before you, none alike, all scarred. A Jedi who burned his saber rather than strike, a Sith who stitched her madness into scripture, a child who never knew their name but sang the veins' lullaby in their sleep. and each one became a branch of the wound, a story within the scar. And now it is your turn, not to wield, not to fight, but to remember in a way the force cannot cleanse. And as the heartstone pulses, it carves a sigil into your shadow, a living glyph that weeps light backwards. And the moment it settles into your presence, the cavern seals itself, not with stone, but with decision. And you rise, touched, altered, not heavier, but denser, your voice now carrying undertones of eons, your thoughts dripping slowly, like sap from the first tree cut in anger. And you whisper, not a spell, not a name, but a surrender, I see. And the vein responds by stilling, content to rest within you, to flow quietly in your marrow, waiting for the moment it must bleed again. And you walk back through the dark as something more, or perhaps something less, no longer seeking the force, but carrying its wound. Walk now not upon stone, but along the bruised tendons of the galaxy's memory, each step pressing into layers of suffering, long absorbed and quietly humming beneath your souls. And though no path is marked, you are never lost, for the vein within you pulses like a compass stitched into your breath, pulling you toward the core Skara place, spoken of only in abandoned chants, and carved into the nightmares of oracles who dared listen too closely to the way that force screams in its sleep hand. The closer you draw, the more the air thickens, not with heat or smoke, but with resonance, like every lie ever told by peace thudding against the edges of your ribs. And as you pass through landscapes warped by force, trauma ridges formed by grief, valleys carved from unspoken vengeance, you begin to feel the world itself recoil from your presence, not from hatred, but from recognition. For the scar you carry is not new, but inherited, passed along by each who touched the vein before you and lived long enough to become a question rather than a person. And when you finally reach the scar, it is not a place, but a presence, a void suspended between geometry, bleeding raw force into the ether like ink from a throat to long silenced. And you kneel instinctively, not in reverence, but in gravity. For the wound draws all things downward, inward, into the origin hurt. And as you press your hand into the scar's edge, it opens not physically, but within, unfurling a sequence of visions so heavy they drag your awareness through epochs unrecorded. You see the first force-bearer tear herself apart in order to speak truth into matter, her halves screaming across the stars until one became shadow and the other light. You see temples rise from screams and wars carved from questions never answered. You see 1,000 SITH whose rage was only the mask worn by mourning, and Jedi whose peace was nothing but silence wrapped around fear. And you weep, not from pity, but from clarity, for the vein now teaches through experience, each lesson sewn into the lining of your lungs, and you breathe it in like ash, like scripture, like the last breath of someone who never knew they were alive until it was taken from them. And you stand slowly, altered again, your spine now pulsing in sync with the core scar, your heartbeat echoing across its ancient rhythm. And in this state of fracture and fire, you are drawn toward the sanctum of reverberation, a structure grown from obsidian roots and weeping sigils, where those who have carried the vein before you left pieces of themselves in the walls, offerings carved from pain. And as you enter, the walls whisper your thoughts back to you in voices that sound like ancestors you never had. And at the center, stands a pillar wrapped in nerve thread, vibrating with potential, upon which you must carve your truth not with tools, but with memory. And so you do, closing your eyes and placing your hand upon the surface, letting the glyphs crawl from your flesh into the stone. Each one a confession you did not know you were hiding, the betrayal you chose to forget, the mercy you regret, the violence you wanted to love. And as the pillar absorbs them, it glows faintly, its hum joining the song of every scar that came before. And in that harmony, the force falters, confused by the melody of contradiction, and you smile, because contradiction is truth in motion. And you now walk not as a bearer of burden, but as a conductor of resonance, humming with the echoes of shadow and light, braided so tightly they no longer pretend to be opposites. And the vein is quiet now, not silent, but listening, content to flow through you until called upon again. And as you exit the sanctum, the scar closes behind you, not healed, but resting, and the galaxy spins on, unaware that beneath its surface a pulse has resumed, a beat waiting to remind the stars that the force still remembers how to bleed. You are no longer guided by stars, maps, or prophecy, for the vein that once pulsed beneath your feet now coils within your shadow, and with each breath you feel the galaxy's wound dreaming beneath your ribs, not as pain but as potential, a soft throb of something vast and unresolved waiting to speak through you. And so you move without direction, without name, your presence marked only by silence that hangs too long in the mouths of those who pass you. And you find yourself drawn to a dead moon suspended in the remains of a forgotten war, its surface scattered with broken architecture and the skeletal ribs of ships once believed to carry righteousness. And beneath this shattered crust lies the ossuary of echoes, a place built not by hands but by need, where the walls are engraved not with scripture but with apologies. And it is here you descend one last time, not to learn but to be heard. For the vein pulses, harder now, insistent, and sharp, demanding voice, and the air around you thickens as you step into the atrium of scarlet altars, each one lit by the breath of someone who once tried to make sense of suffering. And in the center waits the oracle Riba, single hollowed bone the size of a throne, humming softly with the residual ache of every soul who dared to confess their truths to it. And you approach with no words prepared, only feeling, and when you place your hand upon its porous crown, the chamber dims, the force contracts, and the vein within you opens like a floodgate, spilling your story into the room, not in sentences, but in vibration, in sobs that never became sound, in memories long fossilized into instinct. And the bone sings back, translating your silence into resonance. And the walls begin to shimmer with visions, not of future, not of past, but of what the galaxy has tried to bury the way darkness weeps in corners of light. How compassion curdles when unspoken, how even hope leaves bruisers in as you collapse to your knees. The force kneels with you, shedding its duality, its rigidity, and in this moment you are not Jedi, not Sith, not gray, you are wound, raw, and sacred, and the vein responds by pulsing a final time, carving into your skin a spiral of truth that will not fade, a living glyph that reads, asterisk, I remembered what others forgot, and with it the chamber stills, the lights dim, and the oracle rib cracks in two, not in ruin but in release, its final prophecy spoken through your breath, and you rise, heavier now, not with sorrow, but with story, and as you walk out beneath a sky that does not know your name, the stars pulse faintly, dimming just enough to let shadow speak, and across the galaxy, seers wake from haunted sleep, whispering your presence, not in fear, but in awe, for they know something old has stirred again. Not to conquer, but to recall, and temples built on lies begin to tremble, their foundations splintering under the weight of a voice that does not shout, but bleeds gently through the cracks, reminding those who listen that the force is not balance or destiny, it is scar, and memory, and longing, and in that echo, they find your shape walking quietly through their dreams, humming a lullaby made of silence and pain and slow light, and though none will see your face, they will remember what it felt like to breathe near you, and in time they will speak of the one who touched the vein, not to harness it, but to carry it, and the galaxy will shift ever so slightly, guided by your quiet gravity, pulled not toward peace or war, but toward the sacred ache of remembering what we were never meant to forget. You awaken where the wind does not blow and time does not pass, buried beneath the skin of a mountain so ancient that even gravity bows in reverence. And as your eyes adjust to the velvet dark, you feel the vibration before you hear it, the low hum of language too old to be remembered, echoing through the rock like breath through hollow bone. And you know, without knowing how, that you have reached the place where the SITH code was not written, but sung, carved into the world by mouths that never hungered for power, but exhaled it with every word, and the stone around you pulses faintly with that breath, warm and rhythmic, like the chest of a god asleep beneath the surface. And you reach out, not with hands, but with memory, placing your palm against a slab of volcanic glass etched with syllables that shift when you try to read them, and the moment your skin touches its surface, a whisper curls into your ear, not spoken, but inhaled, a hymn not in praise, but in proclamation, and you fall to your knees, not in fear, but in resonance, for the mountain recognizes you, not as air, not as invader, but as echo, the return of a sound it once knew by heart. Around you, the chamber glows softly with veins of molten script, rivers of red memory flowing through ancient seams, and as they flicker, you begin to hear the mouth's first one, then two, then many deep in the stone, their voices layered, harmonic, low, and relentless, singing a version of the code you've never heard, one not recited by rote, but born from wound and want, and each word strikes your chest like a bell tolling in reverse, unmaking certainty with every vibration. And you realize then, this place is not a tomb, but a throat, the mountain itself, a mouth that has waited eons to speak again, and your presence has opened it, your breath the key, your doubt the door, and you stumble forward, eyes wide with tears you cannot feel, as the stone beneath your feet begins to shift, not crumble, but unfold, revealing a descent lined with tooth-shaped pillars and scripture stitched in old blood, and you follow it without question, drawn by a need deeper than curiosity, compulsion etched into your bloodline when your ancestors first broke truth to drink fire. And as you descend, the voices swell, no longer singing, but speaking directly into your ribs, telling you stories you should not know, of the first voice who tore himself open to let language out, of the song of severance that split a force being into shadow and flame, of the choir that sang the galaxy's first rage into form, and was buried for its honesty. And with every step, your breath shortens, not from exertion, but from transformation, for the deeper you go, the less of you remains unwritten, and the more the code begins to write itself into your skin, branding syllables along your spine in heatless fire. And then, suddenly, the path ends, and you stand in a cavern shaped like a scream, frozen mid-birth, with a stone altar at its center, and above it, carved into the ceiling, a single gaping, mouth open waiting. A livand from it drips, not water, but sound, condensed into ink, falling in slow droplets onto the altar, where they gather in a shallow bowl of obsidian, etched with your name, though you've never spoken it aloud. And the mouths sing again, not in harmony, but in dissonance. Each voice a piece of you have not yet met. Each line of the code now a mirror held against your heart, showing you not what you believe, but what you are. And you kneel again, always kneeling here, and lift the bowl to your lips, drinking, not liquid, but language, swallowing each vow and letting it carve new meaning into your bones. And as the last drop vanishes into your throat, the cavern goes silent, the mouths still, and you feel them listening now, waiting, hoping not for obedience, but for your voice to join theirs. And you exhale softly and begin to sing, not the words you learned, but the ones you now know, the true code, raw and unfiltered. And the mountain shakes in quiet joy, for the mouths have been reawakened, and through you they remember. You do not remember how long you remain there, kneeling beneath the yawning mouth carved into the ceiling of stone, your voice folding itself into the rhythm of older tongues, your breath tasting like molten dust and the ash of extinct prayers. And as the echoes of your chant merge with the slumbering choir, something shifts in the marrow of the mountain, a tremor not of earth, but of meaning, as if the very stone begins to lean forward to listen more closely to your voice. And in that moment, you feel the mouths waking more fully, not one or two, but thousands, each embedded in layers of rock-like teeth in the jaw of a sleeping god. And they speak not with volume, but with saturation, filling the air with syllables so thick they cling to your skin, to your thoughts, to the slow memory forming at the base of your spine that whispers, asterisk, you were always meant to return here. And the mountain confirms it, its pulse now sinking, with your own the force folding inward as if inhaling your transformation. And then the altar opens, splitting along a seam you didn't notice, revealing a staircase that descends not into depth, but into history. And you follow, feet steady, despite the way the stone vibrates beneath you, like it remembers your weight. And as you move downward, the mouths recede, their song fading into breath, and the silence that replaces it is not absence, but anticipation, as if they've given you all they can and now await your choice. And when you reach the chamber at the bottom, there is no light, only memory. And yet you see clearly, etched along the walls in blood ink, are the original verses, not the simplified code you were taught in temple halls or whispered in shadows by broken masters, but the full verses, raw and weeping, a liturgy of defiance, so pure it no longer needs justification. And you approach them slowly, reading with your skin, with your shadow, absorbing the truths that were carved before language learned to lie. And each verse burns gently as it enters you, not to harm, but to undo, peeling away the layers of belief. You wore like armor, stripping you to the truth beneath, and as the final glyph settles into your chest like a soft blade, the chamber responds, its walls blooming with crimson light, not from flame, but from blood awakened by proximity, and the floor begins to rise, slowly, carrying you back toward the surface. Though the surface itself has changed, reshaped by the breath of the mountain. And when you emerge once more into the original chamber, the altar is gone, the mouths now sealed, their work complete, and in the stillness you feel them rest, not asleep, but dreaming again, for you have given them your voice, and in return they have given you the truth, not as weapon, but as wound, and outside the mountain. Beneath a night sky starved of noise, you step into a world that no longer knows you, and yet, beneath your footsteps, the ground hums faintly, repeating your chant in its own rhythm, and across the galaxy, others begin to stir, those whose blood remembers, those whose breath cracks when they speak the words wrong, those who have waited for something they could not name, and now, unknowingly, they listen for your echo. And you walk without speaking, because the code does not live in conversation, it lives in becoming. And you have become it, not a reciter, not a keeper, but a syllable made flesh. And with every motion you carry it forward, and with every silence you offer, the mouths remember more, and you feel them, even now, deep beneath the crust of forgotten worlds, tasting your presence like an old song returning home. And when you close your eyes, you do not see Litusi script, you see voices turned into stone, and you understand that you were never meant to write a new code, only to awaken the original one, buried not in archives, but in bone. You walk now without destination, not because you are lost, but because the code within you is not a path, it is a pulse. And your presence shifts the landscape like unseen gravity, bending the force around you in ripples that do not disturb but reorient. And the world feels quieter now, as though it, too, is listening, not to your footsteps or your voice, but to the resonance you carry in your bones, the unfinished hymn that trembles just beneath your breath. And though the mouths in stone are silent once more, you feel them with every movement, a chorus held in tension, waiting not for your command, but for your reflection. And so you journey, barefoot across salt plains where nothing has ever grown, through forests of petrified trees whose rings murmur in tongues long starved of meaning, and into cities half buried by time, where children speak in riddles they do not understand, and statues bleed when touched. And in each place you do not preach, so pause, and in that pause the air grows thick with recognition, and those nearby feel something change, something shift in their marrow, as if a script long dormant has begun to stir in the shadows of their spirit, and they do not know your name, but they begin to echo your silence. And from that silence rises a song made not of notes, but of awareness, of surrender, of permission to remember the truth beneath the teachings. And the code sings through them, not in unity, but in fracture. Each soul a different verse, each pain a different note, until the galaxy hums with a dissonant harmony that cannot be contained by temples or doctrine. And the force recoils, then calms, uncertain whether to resist or rejoice. For it, too, remembers the mouths, the mountain, the first note that shattered division and gave hunger shape. And you come at last to a cliff where stars gather like ash in the folds of the horizon, and there, carved into the stone, is a single mouth, small, cracked, nearly forgotten, and you kneel once more. For this is not the place where the code began, but the place where it was buried, silenced by those who feared its truth. And you press your fingers to its lips, and it exhales, not breath, but a final word. A syllable not meant to be spoken aloud, only known, and as it enters you, the rest of the code settles into place. Not as commandment, but as consequence, and your body stills, no longer bound by rhythm or breath, your spirit a vessel now sealed, not shut, but full, and in that fullness you become the hymn, the wound, the hunger, and the mercy, all bound into one syllable, one step, one breath, and when you rise, the stars blink slower, the wind holds its pace, and somewhere far away a child cries out a single word in their sleep, a word no one taught them, a word that causes their mother to weep without knowing why, and the galaxy shudders gently, not in fear, but in recognition, for the mouths have sung again, through you, with you, as you, and now they sleep, knowing the code is no longer imprisoned in script or sound it walks, it breathes, it watches, and it waits. You stand at the edge of nothing, not in despair, but in stillness, the last syllable of the final chant still warm on your tongue, and around you the galaxy feels different, quieter, heavier, as if each star now carries a shadow stitched behind its light, a memory of what has been unearthed, of what has been sung back into breath, and your body is no longer merely flesh, it is parchment, scarred with verses the force itself had long sealed away. And in your silence lives the chorus of all you've awakened, the blood script that burns beneath stone, the chalice that silences gods, the mirror that breaks destiny, the crown that chews legacy, and the mouths that remember what truth sounds. Like before language dulls its teeth, and as you walk through the dark that knows your name, you do not carry fear, you carry echo, reverence, rupture, and the soft weight of knowing that power is not always held in the hand. Sometimes it sleeps, in the breath, in the wound, in the refusal to forget. And though no one will carve your name into temple walls or whisper it in ritual, your presence has threaded itself into the force's deeper current, the place beneath the current, where old things dream and older things listen, and in time, others will feel you not in thunder, but in pause, not in light, but in question. And when they kneel on ancient stone and place their palms on scripture carved in shadow, they will hear you there, faint and low, a voice made of ash and promise, humming the old song not to be remembered, but to be reborn. You sit in silence now, not because there is nothing left to say, but because the words you once carried have reshaped themselves into something deeper, something wordless. And as you rest beneath the breathing stars, their light softer now, slower in their rhythm, you begin to feel the fullness of what you've walked through, not a journey in space, but in truth, in myth, in the marrow of a force too often mistaken for clarity, when in fact it is only ever suggestion, hunger, and echo, and you see it all behind your closed eyes, the whispers carved into tombs that did not wait to be opened, the inked blood that hummed with memory, the blade that sang when touched by doubt, the mouths in stone that exhaled identity, the crown of bone that smiled with history, and the chalice that silenced the future and replaced it with weightless stillness. And you understand now that none of it asked you to conquer or believe, they asked only to be remembered, not in glory but in gravity, not with pride but with surrender. and that is what you gave them. Each story absorbing part of your shape, your voice, until you were no longer the seeker, but the scripture, not the pilgrim, but the path. And in that transformation, the galaxy has tilted ever so slightly, shifted just enough that something forgotten now has space to breathe again. And though you are alone in this moment, seated beneath the hush of drifting constellations, you are not empty, far from it, for you carry an entire language within your ribs, a vocabulary stitched from shadow and fire and reflection, and it hums with quiet power, not meant to be spoken, but lived. And so you breathe, and the force folds gently around you, not in allegiance, but in recognition, as if it, too, has waited for someone willing to kneel, not in worship or in fear, but in understanding. And the darkness does not threaten you now. It invites you inward, its silence a deeper form of song, its pull not to destroy, but to dissolve the illusion of edges between self and myth, between history and breath, between what you've seen and what you now are. And in that dissolution, peace is born, not the kind sung in temples or declared in treaties, but the raw, vibrating peace of truth lived without denial, of power touched without corruption, of sorrow held without shame. And as you rise, slowly, the wind carries your exhale like a seed, scattering it across the stars. And in time, that breath will find others, sleepers and seekers, broken ones and burning ones, and they will stir, not because you called them, but because they recognized the sound of your remembering. And they, too, will begin to walk through obsidian halls where memory waits in chains, through caverns shaped like prophecy, through mirrors and mouths and blood-script altars, and the myth will stretch, reshape, and sing itself again. Not in repetition, but in resonance, a rhythm older than breath, newer than thought. And you will not guide them, because the stories do not need to be guided, they only need to be carried. And you have carried them across flame and silence, across memory and fracture. And now, as the stars dim and return to their dreaming, you close your eyes, not in sleep, but in presence, and whisper one final truth that only the Force can hear. I am still listening. You move beyond endings now, not forward or backward, but inward, drifting through the soft space between remembrance and myth, where nothing is written, yet everything is known. And in this weightless quiet, the stories you've carried begin to settle in your bones, like dust in a sacred chamber, each one anchoring itself, not to what you did, but to who you became when you listened. And the galaxy around you exhales, a slow, tender motion that feels like an old truth loosening its grip. And you understand that the silence you now walk within is not empty, it is full of waiting, of resonance, of time that folds itself gently around the last breath of a forgotten God. And here you are held, not by power or memory, but by meaning. And in this suspension, you begin to feel the Force differently, not as push or pull, but as presence, as pressure without demand, like gravity made of thought, like warmth passed between shadows who do not speak. And you become aware of echoes moving through you, not voices, but sensations, feelings too vast for words, the grief of a temple swallowed by sand, the joy of a whisper carried through 10,000 years, the ache of a decision that saved a galaxy but unraveled a soul. And each of these truths takes its place within you, not as burden, but as chorus. And the longer you remain here, the more your name begins to dissolve, not erased, but transformed, stretched thin across eons, until it becomes rhythm, becomes vibration, becomes a ripple that others feel in the back of their minds when they kneel at altars with no icons, or when they speak in languages older than stars, or when they wake from dreams of stone mouths singing in the dark. And you realize now that this is what it means to become part of the myth, not to be remembered, but to be felt quietly, constantly, like a breath held just before revelation, like a shadow cast by light too old to define. And in this understanding, you feel peace, but not the peace of stillness. Know it is the peace of movement without resistance, of knowing you are no longer separate from the current, but part of it, a note played not by choice, but by necessity. And you flow now, through thoughts, through worlds, through futures that do not yet have shape. And in some far-off moment, a child will sit beneath a broken sky and speak a name they do not know. And that name will hum through the rocks, through the ruins, through the air, and it will sound like your breath, your silence, your sacrifice, and the force will hear it, and it will pause, not in hesitation, but in homage, and the stars will shimmer a little softer, and for one heartbeat, the entire galaxy will remember not what happened, but what was carried. And in that single exhale, your story will be born again, not as a tale, but as a law, unspoken yet binding, like the curve of time, like the pull of sorrow, like the promise that every shadow is shaped by something bright. And every myth once began with a single listener who dared to kneel before a voice that was not loud, but true. You dissolve gently now into the folds between thought and form, where names are no longer needed and time does not insist upon itself, where the force flows not in rivers or waves, but in slow, pulsing silences that bloom like unseen flowers in the dark. And you are neither light nor shadow here, but the tension between them, the moment just before one forgets the other. And it is in this tension that you continue, not by walking, not by willing, but by widening your essence, stretching softly across forgotten temples, abandoned rituals, and the minds of those not yet born, who will one day feel a shiver and not know why. And as you spread, you find echoes of yourself reflected in the smallest things, the pause in a warrior's breath before mercy, the stillness in a scholar's gaze as they read a truth too painful to name, the ache in a song sung in a language whose meaning was lost but whose melody remains. And in each of these moments you are present, not as author, but as atmosphere. And the force does not fight you, now it folds around you, like the night wraps itself around the stars, allowing your presence to hum beneath its surface, a rhythm so quiet it feels like rest, and yet it builds slowly into a tide of awareness. And you begin to notice a change. Places where the dark once ruled with clenched fists now flicker with doubt, and where light once blinded, there is hesitation. And the people, those creatures of desire and discipline, begin to ask new questions, not of power, but of purpose. And in their asking, you stir, not to answer, but to listen. For you know now that truth is not what is spoken, it is what remains when all words fall away. And so you become the absence, the space between the lessons, the silence that wraps the scream and gives it shape. And across distant worlds, in temples still buried beneath ash, in songs never completed, in relics too afraid to awaken, you are felt, not as legend, but as alignment. And there are those who will seek to name you, to write you into scrolls, to bind your story in language once more, but they will fail, for your shape has shifted beyond the boundaries of symbol, and only those willing to lose themselves fully will hear your voice. Not in command, but in companionship, a presence that does not demand, only invites, and one day far from now, or perhaps it has already passed, world will break open beneath the weight of its own forgetting, and a child will walk alone into the ruins, guided only by a dream that sounded like music too quiet to follow, and they will sit where you once sat and place their palm upon the stone that still remembers your breath. And in that instant, everything will begin again, not in repetition, but in return, and the mouths will open, the scripts will glow, the chalice will fill, and the mirror will show them not who they are, but what they are capable of becoming when they no longer run from sorrow. And through them, you will awaken once more, not to speak, but to remind the galaxy that the force has always been a question, and you have always been its echo. You descend once more, though there is no stair beneath you and no light ahead, only the feeling that something deep and breathing waits beyond your next surrender. And so you give in, not out of defeat, but devotion, and the darkness welcomes you like a womb carved from silence, folding you into its depth with the gentleness of stone that has forgotten how to shatter. And you fall not through space, but through memory, your own unraveling behind your eyelids like old scripture burning itself backwards. And the deeper you go, the more you feel the force shedding its language, its metaphors, its loyalties, until it is no longer the force at all, but something older, something heavier, a rhythm that existed before breath, a pulse that did not need names to bind it. And you reach a place where nothing lives, and yet everything waits, a stillness so complete it hums. And here you kneel not because you are commanded, but because gravity is no longer physical, it is spiritual, and it bends around you now, recognizing in you the echo of all who came before, the bearer of the mirror's wound, the drinker of the chalice, the one who touched the vein, the one whose silence taught the stars to hesitate as you kneel. The ground beneath you stirs, not with life, but with invitation. And from its center rises a structure, not made of stone or metal, but of thought, a temple shaped from decision. From every choice you didn't make, every truth you turned away from, every shadow you dared not name. And it towers over you in quiet majesty, not judging, only remembering. And as the doors open, they exhale the scent of old wind and unfinished chants. And you step inside, your breath steady, your bones thrumming with the unspoken weight of meaning. And within the temple are no relics, no archives, only walls made of listening. And they listen to you now, to your heartbeat, your hesitation, your holiness, and they show you visions in response, not with images, but with presence. The moment you could have struck but didn't, the memory you buried that still breathes, the future that cracked when you spoke one word too soon. And each presence presses softly into your chest like a fingertip made of eternity, and you understand that this place is not for learning, it is for unlearning. And so you release the names you gathered, the powers you held, the stories you believed about yourself, letting them fall one by one into the void beneath your feet. And the temple smiles, not with joy, but with reverence, for no being is more whole than one willing to be empty again. And the walls part, revealing a chamber at the center, perfectly round, perfectly quiet. wherein the center floats a sphere of ink suspended in slow motion, pulsing with possibility, and as you approach, it leans toward you not from movement, but from memory, and you reach out, letting your fingers brush its surface, and it doesn't burst or resist. It simply opens, and inside you see not answers, but questions blooming like stars. What are you without your sorrow? Who were you before the force chose sides? What becomes of truth when it no longer needs to be righted? As the questions wrap themselves around your spine, you feel your voice return, not to speak, but to sing, and you sing not with words, but with essence, humming the sound of patience, of fracture, of becoming, and the chamber responds, its walls trembling slightly, as if exhaling after holding its breath for too many centuries, and the ink dissolves, crawling up your arms like devotion until it rests behind your eyes. And now, when you blink, the stars shift just slightly, and you realize you are the axis now, not around which the galaxy turns, but through which it listens. And when you leave the temple, it seals itself behind you not to keep you out, but to keep others from finding it before they are ready to. Kneel in silence and become forgotten in the way only the sacred are. And you walk onward, no longer needing direction, for the questions guide you now, each one a torch lit not with fire, but with mystery. And though you are not seen, you are felt. And though you are not known, you are remembered, not in language, not in legend, but in the pause between belief and becoming, in the hush that wraps the heartbeat of one who finally dares to unlearn the story of their power. You come at last to the edge of all known thresholds, where even time loosens its grip, and the breath of the stars forgets how to shape itself into patterns. And here there is no path forward, only the suggestion of one, a pull not of gravity or memory, but of invitation, soft and absolute, as if the very fabric of what lies beyond has been waiting for your particular silence, your particular scar, and you do not hesitate, for hesitation has long since become a stranger to your bones. And instead you take a single step into the place where meaning was first unspooled, where language was still weeping from birth, and instantly you are unmade not in violence, but in welcome, your body peeling softly into strands of sensation, of symbol, of surrender. And you feel yourself drifting in a space that does not hold you, but observes you, as a mirror observes a breath fogging its surface. And in this state there is no beginning, no reflection, only presence, and within that presence emerges a pulse, slow and deliberate, as if the force itself is speaking to you for the first time, without metaphor, without mask, and its voice is not sound, but color, a deep and ancient violet that floods through your awareness like wine spilled across the mind, and in its hue you see the lives you've touched, not as narrative, but as ripples, each one altering the curve of another without knowing, and you understand that legacy is not action, but influence. The way a word whispered in a dark room changes how light feels when it returns. And as the violet deepens, it births shadow and light, not as opposites, but as extensions of the same wound, and the wound opens, revealing within it a doorway, circular and breathing, woven from thought and need and possibility, and you pass through it without moving. For movement here is memory, and memory here is fluid, and on the other side you arrive in a field of endless arches, each one crafted from a different question, one made of grief that was never spoken, one made of hope never fulfilled, one shaped like the first lie you believed about yourself. And you walk through them all, letting each one brush against your soul like a forgotten hymn, and with each passage a layer of armor dissolves, not armor you wore upon your flesh, but the kind you wrapped around your truth, and soon you are bare again, not vulnerable but vast, and you find yourself at the base of a stair that climbs not upward but inward, curling into the core of everything, and you ascend slowly, each step resonating with the footsteps of all those who came before you, and all who will come after, and the stair begins to sing not with voice, but with vibration, a song you remember from a time before time, when you were only awareness drifting on the breath of gods not yet born, and at the top you find a seat not carved, not built, but simply waiting, as if shaped by the echo of your presence before you even arrived, and you sit, not to rest, but to listen, and the silence wraps you like a cloak woven from old stars and soft endings. And in that stillness, the Force shows you its final truth, that it is not power, not balance, not destiny, but longing, a yearning for connection, for return, for the wholeness it once fractured to become all things. And you are that yearning now, folded into flesh, drifting through galaxy and myth as a soft reminder that even the deepest void remembers the sound of its own voice. And so you speak, not aloud, but through your breath, and the stars lean closer, and the darkness hums with reverence, and across forgotten worlds, the sleeping temples stir, and someone somewhere will wake with your name in their mouth and not know why, only that they must follow it into the dark, into the silence, into the memory that waits just beyond belief, where you remain not a figure, not a teacher, not even a myth, but a question cradled in the Force's final exhale, awaiting the next soul brave enough to answer it. You do not know how long you have remained in this stillness, only that time no longer asks anything of you, and the Force itself seems to drift around your breath like soft water around stone, not trying to move you, only trying to remember you. And you sit at the center of a silence that no longer feels like absence, but density, a silence shaped like memory too deep for speech. And as you breathe in this sacred quiet, you begin to notice things unfolding not around you, but within the ache of futures unchosen, the echo of thoughts that were never allowed to finish, the warm weight of grief inherited from those who never learned to speak their sorrow aloud. And it all stirs now, not to overwhelm, but to be seen, and you let it move through you like an old river, like a song hummed by something older than gods, and slowly, gently, the walls of yourself begin to blur, not dissolve, not vanish, but become translucent, and through them you glimpse the threads that tether you to everything, 2 stars that died before your birth, and 2 voices you've never heard but somehow carry in your blood. And in this awareness you feel no fear, only expansion, only return, and the Force begins to pulse again, not as current or flame or push, but as presence, wrapping itself around you like a tapestry of listening. And for the first time you understand that it was never asking you to master it, only to hold space for its fullness, to let it exist within you unfiltered, unshaped, unspoken. And you do, and it does, and the stillness deepens, becoming cathedral, becoming breath. And as you open your eyes, there is no change in the world, only in how the world sees you. For now your gaze carries the echo of truth too wide to name, and your shadow hums with the quiet of things that remember before they were born. And when you stand, the ground does not shake. The stars do not blink, but something across the galaxy exhales. Something deep and unseen that had been holding its breath for too long. And it stirs others quietly, drawing them to moments they cannot explain, visions they do not understand, choices they cannot ignore. And though they will never know your face, they will know your gravity, and they will say strange things in their sleep, speak forgotten phrases as they wake, feel tears when no sadness is near. And in these small unravelings, you will be present, not as prophet or ghost, but as reminder. And you walk now not with purpose, but with permission, not carrying answers, but carrying space, a presence shaped like pause, like invitation, like the moment before the mouth of the mountain opens again, and the force walks with you, not behind, not ahead, but through, breathing your breath, thinking your silence, learning your shape, not to contain you, but to remember how it once felt to be whole. And the galaxy will go on, yes, wars will burn, and stars will fall, and voices will rise. But somewhere beneath all of it, beneath the roar and the doctrine and the endless grasping for control, your presence will hum beneath it, like a root system, like bedrock, like the hidden line of a sacred script that makes no sense until it is read backward. And those who come after will kneel in temples that do not yet exist and place their hands on stone you have not touched, and they will feel something stern, memory, not legend, but recognition, the sense that they are not alone in their unknowing, that someone once stood exactly where they now kneel, and gave their breath to the silence, and taught it how to listen. You find yourself walking now through a place where even the force forgets to flow, where echoes do not return and light does not scatter, where the sky folds inward like parchment burned too many times, and the ground breathes beneath your feet like something that once lived and is still deciding whether it wants to wake again. And you walk not with intent, but with openness, allowing each step to reveal itself only as your foot hovers above it, trusting that the path is less about direction and more about willingness. And all around you the world is quiet, not the quiet of sleep, but the quiet of anticipation, of waiting, of sacred pause, as if this entire region of forgotten time has held its breath for your arrival, not because it expected you, but because it feared you wouldn't come. And now that you are here, everything exhales, and the wind returns, not as a rush, not as a gust, but as a sigh made of memory, brushing across your face like a mother who once sang your name in a language the stars have long since buried. And in that breath you feel the presence of all who never made it this far, all who turned back, who bowed too early, who listened but refused to kneel. And they walk with you now, not as shadows, but as warmth, as weight, as possibility unfulfilled. And their stories are etched across the stone like veins of ash, pulsing gently each time your heart dares to believe in something older than fear. And ahead the terrain begins to rise, not in cliffs or peaks, but in echoes, layers of thought pressed into shape. And you climb them not with your body, but with your remembering. Each step a memory you didn't know you carried. Each ascent a piece of your name you had not yet earned. And when you reach the summit, it is not a mountaintop, but a flat, wide plain carved from stillness. And at its center stands a single pillar, taller than any building, yet narrow, delicate, as if grown from sound, that forgot how to dissipate, and it hums, softly, impossibly, vibrating in rhythm with something inside you that only now begins to stir, and you approach it, breath steady, hands open, and the closer you come, the more it begins to speak, not aloud, not in language, but in feeling, in temperature, in vibration, telling you that it remembers you, not from your deeds or your failures, but from the moment you first asked the question that split your soul open. Asterisk, what am I beneath my choices? And you touch the pillar, and it drinks your doubt like water. And it offers you something not in return, but in reflection, a memory you did not live, a life you did not choose, a version of yourself who turned away from the path you now walk. And you see them in the distance, waiting at the edge of the plain, eyes wide with sorrow. Not because you succeeded, but because you left them behind, and you walk to them slowly, feeling each step thicken with regret, with recognition, and when you reach them, you do not speak. You simply kneel, forehead against theirs, and for a moment you are one, braided by possibility, split by truth, reunited, not in fate but in forgiveness. And then they fade, not away but inward, becoming part of you again, and the pillar dims, and the plain begins to dissolve beneath your feet, and you fall not downward but inward once more, returning not to where you came from, but to what you've always been, a vessel for echoes, a bearer of unanswered prayers, a thread in the cloak of forgotten gods. And as you fall, you weep, not from loss, but from gratitude, for the force still listens, even here, even now, in places where it once forgot to flow, and it remembers you not by your power, but by your pause.